Let's welcome on board Amnish Aggarwal too. Amnish, hi, morning, and let's start off with Pharma. The numbers are looking good, but any preferences? Should one look beyond CDMO now?
Yeah, hi Aisha. You see, pharma in the past, say if you look at last 10, 15 days, it has been sort of coming back. And the main reason was that the market was a lot jittery at that point of time, and also the pharma valuations have been attractive relative to the valuations at which they are quoting it. However, I think if you look at the numbers of the past few days, I think the numbers have been good. If you look at particularly the MNC pharma companies like GSK or Pfizer, I think the numbers are quite decent, and I think the stocks are also not expensive. But having said that, our current preference still revolves around, say, your names like Sun Pharma, where I think the numbers were okayish. And if you look at the overall scenario, I think the pharma as a pack continues to look good.
Amnish, how do you see some of the specialty chemical companies? We've seen a decent comeback by some of the companies with respect to earnings. Navin Fluorine being one, and others also we have seen.
You see, in specialty chemicals, one has to look at, say, from company to company. Navin Fluorine in particular, the numbers have been pretty decent. But if you look at their future expansion plans and where the stock is currently poised, I think it is already trading at something like 37, 38 times on FY28. But having said that, I think if the actual impact of this US trade deal plays out over a period of time, then there could be more growth opportunities for many of these chemical companies. But it is not something which is going to happen in a day. It will take its own sweet time.
I'll quickly read out the numbers of Navin Fluorine because the numbers really stood out. You've got revenue growth of 47% YOY. You've got EBITDA, which more than doubled from 147 crore. It stood at 307 crore on a YOY basis. Margins went up to 34%. Now, when I'm looking at the QOQ number as well, margins have jumped from 30 to 32 to 34. So we're seeing an increasing trend with regard to margins, even when we are looking at the sequential kind of the run rate. And then you've got profitability, which is up 120% YOY, which is not surprising, frankly. Profits up at 185 crore versus the 84 crore number. Some currency tailwind as well, you reckon, aiding some of these names, Amnish, and not just Navin, but also, there were a couple of other pharma names, the likes of an Oro, where the numbers were standout. How much of it do you believe is just operational efficiency playing out because growth has started to come back? How much of it is actually currency tailwind? Because that may not really last, right?
You see, the currency tailwind, first of all, one has to look at it. Rupee used to be 88, 89. And now whether it is going back to 89, I think I'm particularly doubtful about it because it is definitely not likely to go there. It might not be, say, 92 in the immediate term. Now, the second part is that many of these companies, I would say there's a lot of gains from stable raw material prices as also the efficiency gains. So to that extent, I think the numbers of many of these pharma companies, they seem sustainable. One has to separate between the generic pharma companies and the companies which are having more domestic exposure. Because in case of many of these generic pharma companies, a couple of molecules which were actually driving the sales, whether it is Zydus, whether it is, I believe, Dr. Reddy's, and also those molecules, I think they are not likely to get benefit from that. But definitely the numbers have been pretty decent for most of the names, and the valuations are not expensive at this point of time.
Well, the jewelry stocks once again are going to be in focus. Yesterday it was Kalyan Jewellers. Today it's going to be all about Titan, given that it's slated.
NSE's numbers in particular, because that's a stock very widely tracked and widely loved by investors as well. How do you look at the numbers? Some bit of margin contraction, you reckon? Of course, they are highlighted on the con call that margins have gone up from sub 40 to nearly 60%. But essentially, there's been some taper down with regard to margins.
You see that if you look at BSE, then I think their profitability and margins, they have improved over the quarters. But having said that, I think the F&O segment is some bit, I would say, under pressure. And the market is also not in that sort of a zone from the last, say, 3 months or so. So that is, I think, getting reflected in the performance of BSE. Because in exchanges, it's a highly, I would say, your operating leverage is very high, which acts on both sides. So last quarter, I think the markets in general were very jittery. Small cap and mid caps were down quite a bit, where BSE is also having, I would say, the bigger share, because many of these, you can say, older small cap, mid cap, they are listed only on BSE. And also, I think the overall sentiment actually plays out a role. So I think it is just a passing phase, and the things will rebound as we go along.
Amnish, even though BSE's market share has gone up to about 30% in January, we also have this NSE IPO which is expected in this calendar year. Do you see some kind of, taper down in the valuation of BSE, because now you have a second exchange also coming, so some kind of taper down that will happen in the value?
It's difficult to say at this point of time, but if you look at global exchanges, so they actually get a valuation of 30 to 40 times very easy. So is BSC overly expensive? That doesn't look like at this point of time. But having said that, it will also be a function of how your NSE gets listed. That is one. And secondly, in terms of volumes, it will also gain, because once NSE gets listed, it will be listed only on BSE. So to that extent, it will also be an advantage BSE to some extent.
Okay, what we'll do is step into a very short break. We'll continue conversation on the other side. Plenty of move. Amnish, I wonder, within the EMS basket, views are divergent. What's your sense of how do you play EMS, and is there a preference in terms of stocks?
You see, the numbers on the EMS side, as you said, they have been very volatile, because the companies have been either reporting very high numbers, or where there are misses also, the misses have been very, very significant. Now, if you look at I think Amber's number yesterday, the numbers were quite good. And if the summer season next time also remains strong as is expected, for the air conditioners, I think Amber as such should do well. So from that angle, I think Amber continues to do good. Even in case of Dixon, I think the numbers were pretty strong. So I think Amber and Dixon, which have been there listed from quite some time, where the numbers are strong and the valuations are not as expensive, I think they still seems to be better praised than some of the other companies.
Interesting. Let me also welcome on board Pritesh Mehta and find out